In this video, we're going to be talking about object origins and the 3D cursor in Blender. So let's start off initially with the object origin. The object origin in Blender is that little orange dot that you see right in the center of the object. The one that looks like a cross with the dotted circle on top of it is the 3D cursor. We're going to concentrate just on the orange dot to begin with. So let's move Suzanne around and you'll see that the orange dot moves alongside Suzanne. The orange dot, which is the object origin, actually indicates where the object originates from within world space. So basically, this orange dot is the place from which Suzanne originates within your Blender scene. If we want to, for example, do some more complex operations in the future, which we will, we're going to notice that the origin point is extremely important with those. For example, stuff like some modifiers over here, which we're going to look into detail in the future. A lot of them use the object origin point, so it's good to kind of get to know what the origin point actually does. I'm going to zero Suzanne in on the grid right now, and I'm going to show you some basic ways with which using the origin point can affect how you work within 3D space. So I'm going to pop multiple objects. Each and every one of these cubes has, you know, they're separate objects. They have their own origin point. So I'm going to basically select one of the cubes, let's say this one. And as you can see, every single operation I do on this cube, scaling, moving, rotating, everything is done through the origin point. Like everything you can imagine with this cube goes through the origin point. Can you see it? Like just the circle going around the origin point indicates that basically whatever operation I do, like for example here the scaling, is being done through the origin point. So that basically goes for each and every one of these objects. However, where things start to get a little bit interesting is when we start to alter the way we select things and the way we scale, move, and rotate things. Like just as I showed you right now, when you select a single object, you know, you can rotate it, scale it, and whatnot. The point from which these scaling and rotating and moving operations happen is the origin point. But let's say we want to change that. Let's say we want to, for example, go to this menu and use some of these other options here that we have for these operations. Let's see what they do. For example, what's going to happen if I choose bounding box center? It's going to coincide with the origin point and nothing is going to change, basically. Here. However, if I choose 3D cursor, that thing right here, you're going to notice that right now I'm moving this object not from its origin point, but from the 3D cursor. And we're going to go into detail on that a little bit later. And I'm going to show some operations that can be done for this. So you see when I choose 3D cursor, all operations happen from the 3D cursor instead of the origin point. But here is where things get really interesting. Let's say I select all of these. What's going to happen if I start to rotate and move and scale? It basically averages the origin points out of all of these into a single point that's in the middle of all of these origin points, yeah? So that's what happens basically. The volume gets calculated and you do all of your operations from a point that's somewhere within all of these origin points. But what you can do here is select individual origins. And when you do so, you're going to be able to manipulate each element individually, solely based on their own origin points, which is really awesome if you're doing a scene with large objects. So again, going here, individual origins, boom. This is a very interesting way for you to go about working with your objects. And again, if you select 3D cursor, everything's going to happen from the 3D cursor. So let's talk a little bit more about the 3D cursor because it's really an interesting thing to use. If I hold down Shift, just a sec. Yeah, so if I hold down Shift and press right click, I can move the cursor wherever I want. Like, let's say I want to move it here to Suzanne's ear. And if I select Suzanne and I go over here and press 3D cursor, boom, I'm able to rotate from Suzanne's ear. But I'm also able to scale from Suzanne's ear. And I'm also able to move from Suzanne's ear, which is really interesting. I can do this basically wherever I want. Like I can shift right click even somewhere in space, like for example over here. And you can see that I'm able to do every single operation from that exact point. Well, now that we've moved this, maybe we want to have it back into the center. No, it's the place where it actually comes from. So we can do that by going to Object, Snap, Cursor to World Origin, and that brings it back to the center of the world. But there are many other things we can do. For example, let's select Suzanne and go to Edit Mode. Go to Edit Mode. And let's say that I want to rotate Suzanne from this here vertex, right here, this one. So I'm basically going to select it, and I'm going to press Shift S, which is a shortcut for working with the cursor. And I'm going to say Vert. And it's going to snap the cursor to that vertex that I've selected. So now when I press the rotate button in object mode, it's going to rotate from that exact vertex, scale from that exact vertex, and do basically everything from that exact vertex. And still keep in mind that I need to have 3D cursor selected over here. Again, if I want to zero this out and have it back in the world center, Object, Snap, World Origin. Now, let's delete this. And I'm going to press Shift-A to add an object. And I'm going to press Cube. And what you notice is that it's created in the middle of the scene, like we've seen in previous videos. What would happen if I press Shift right click here and move the cursor, and then press Shift-A and add a cube? Boom! The cube is created wherever the cursor is. So if I press it here, Shift-A, cube, Shift-A, cube. That's basically how we can navigate through creating objects in different places in space. Let's do something more complex. Let's open these cubes. Let's say that I want to create a cylinder right on top of this here cube. So I'm going to go into edit mode. I'm going to go to the face selection. I'm going to select this polygon right here. I'm going to press Shift S and say cursor to face. So now my cursor is over to this face. And if I go to object mode and press Shift A, mesh cylinder, voila, I'm able to create this cylinder exactly where I wanted it to be, on top of this here cube. So that's really useful with geometry creation. So let's say we want to place a Suzanne monkey on top of the cylinder. Edit mode, selecting the face, Shift S, the face, object mode, Shift A, mesh, monkey. Boom. This is how we can go about object creation with the use of these selection techniques. One other thing that we can do, which is really handy, is we can actually change the cursor position to any selected object. So for example, let's select one of these other cubes, like this one. If you go to Object, Snap, Cursor to Selected, Object, Snap, Cursor to Selected, you can see that it snapped over to the cube that I had clicked. Shift S to Selected does the exact same thing, so pick your poison as to how you want to do this. Shift S to Selected. And at this point, this is about just about covers what I wanted to discuss about the origin points and the cursor. We're going to delve into more details about how modifiers work with the origins in later videos. Bye bye.